This is without a doubt the creepiest mugshot I've ever seen. This is 33-year-old Solomon Galligan. He is an S offender that tried to kidnap a little boy from an elementary school in Colorado.
You already know what it is. It's your boy Laid Back with another reaction, another review, another episode. Hey, TikTok, you up to bat. Bah. It's your boy Laid Back. Welcome back to my channel. Hey, two things we gotta do. You gotta hit that subscribe button. I'm drinking this water. You already know what it is, man. You are the prize in 2025. You are the prize in 2025. Make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you hit the notification bell. Stay up to date with all the videos. Look, we back with another one. Hey, this is some true crime, conspiracy type, crazy type. This is gonna be different. So you make it to the end of this one, you a real one for real. So this is what we're gonna do in this video. Anybody that drop any comment on this video, I'm gonna try to heart it. Now for the people that's OGs, y'all remember back in the day, I was hearting every comment. So every comment on this video, I'm gonna heart it. We're gonna see how long that take. But let's go ahead and get into it. Fire Squad, what's popping? Let's get it.
True crime case that you just can't stop thinking about. I always wonder what really happened to 6-year-old Catherine Korzelius. On August 7th, 1996, Catherine, along with her mom Nancy and her brother Chris, were out running errands. Catherine's dad was Paul Korzelius, who at the time was the tour manager for Jon Bon Jovi. That day was Paul's birthday, so they were all out looking for a present for him. They all lived on Elder Circle, which is a small neighborhood near Austin, Texas. When they got back to Elder Circle, Catherine wanted to pick up the mail from the community mailbox and then walk home. The mailboxes were only about an eighth of a mile from their home, and Catherine had done this a few times before, so her mom let her. Catherine would take the shorter route home, while her mom and brother would take the longer route around Elder Circle. This way,
What? She's 6.
they would be getting home at almost the same time. But once Nancy and Chris got home with still no sign of Catherine, Nancy sent Chris to go and look for her. But when Chris couldn't find her, Nancy started searching for her by car. Within minutes, they found her laying in the middle of the road on Elder Circle. She was unconscious but still breathing. According to Nancy, she didn't want to make her daughter lay on the hot pavement, so she picked her up and took her to the hospital. Little Catherine suffered from a fractured skull and never regained consciousness. And sadly, she died later that day. Authorities initially thought that Catherine was a victim of a hit and run, but certain things didn't add up. Where Catherine's body was found was in an unusual spot. Her mom last saw her walking towards their house, but her body was found a little over a mile away from their home in the opposite direction that she was supposed to have gone. Catherine's body was actually found along the route that her mom and brother took to get home, and the autopsy only deepened the mystery. The autopsy showed that Catherine didn't die from a hit and run. Along with her head injury, she also had abrasions on her left shoulder, lower back, right hip, and her knees. The ME found that Catherine had either jumped, fallen, or was thrown from a moving vehicle.
No.
One theory investigators came up with was that Catherine maybe tried to hold on to the back of her mom's car on the drive home, but fell off. This would explain the location of where her body was found. But her family did not believe this, so they hired a PI. The PI noted that it was a really hot summer day, and at the time, Catherine's left thumb was broken and in a splint, so it would have been really difficult for her to hold on to anything. And it's likely her mom would have seen her in the rearview mirror. Catherine's family believes she was abducted and murdered. After her death, investigators brought in a canine unit that tracked her scent to a vacant lot 30 yards from the mailboxes, but it was lost after that. This sparked a theory that Catherine was approached by an attacker at the mailboxes, ran into the lot, was caught and thrown into a car, struck in the head, and then was thrown out of the vehicle where she was found. Nancy also stated that it appeared her daughter's body was laid out for her to find. Her hair was smoothed down, her clothes were straight, and her sandals were still on. Unfortunately, there's never been any answers in this case, and it's still labeled a suspicious death. Jon Bon Jovi wrote a song dedicated to Catherine called August 7, 415. And sadly, in March of 2020, Catherine's brother Chris, who grew up to be a police officer, was tragically killed in a car accident.
Why did she add that at the end?
115 dead bodies were just found rotting inside of this funeral home in Colorado yesterday.
What?
This is an extremely disturbing news story. So this is the Return to Nature funeral home in Colorado Springs, Colorado. They specialize in green burials, which is kind of a new trendy thing, which amongst other things means that your body is not embalmed upon your death. So you're kind of left to rot and just go back into nature as you came into the world. But it seems like the owners of this funeral home took that process a step too far. So inside of this funeral home, where there's 2,500 square feet of space, they discovered 115 bodies. I mean, I can't imagine what the interior of that building looked and smelled like. And according to the police department that made this shocking discovery, most of those bodies were so badly decomposed that they can only identify them through DNA. Obviously, this means that these bodies have been stored there improperly for a very, very long time. In another interesting twist, the authorities actually stated that they don't know exactly what this funeral home was doing with these bodies. Some theories include they may have been selling body parts. Obviously, they may have just been telling people they were burying their loved ones and they weren't. Or there could be other gruesome, disturbing things that were happening here that I guess we'll find out about soon. Yeah, so since this happened yesterday, we don't know much about what exactly was going on here, but I'll be sure to update you guys once we find out more about what the hell was going on at this funeral home.
Bruh, what?
If you have anxiety or paranoia issues, scroll. Okay, so in the fall of 1971, 33-year-old Sandra Horwath was a newly divorced single mother of 3 little girls. Now here's where things get iffy. On October 1st of 1973, Sandra went to put her 3 daughters to bed, Robin, Tammy, and Becky. Now Sandra's oldest, Robin, always wanted to sleep in bed with her mother. This was not a new thing. Almost every single night, she slept in the bed with her mama. But on this particular night, Sandra would not let Robin sleep in bed with her. Like, she's persistent, you cannot sleep with me tonight, you have to stay in your own bed. This really confused Robin because her mother never had a problem with her sleeping in the bed. The next morning, Sandra's 3 little girls get up like they normally did, but there is a loud silence throughout the home. They get up, start looking throughout the house for mom. She's not in her room. She's not in the kitchen. Sandra's oldest daughter was only like 6 to 7 years old, but she had enough maturity in herself to pick up the phone, and she called her mom's work. Sandra's boss picks up the phone, tells Sandra's little girl she's most definitely not here. So Robin hangs up the phone and then she calls her babysitter. This babysitter, I don't know her name, was a person that watched the 3 little girls whenever Sandra had something to do. Robin tells the babysitter, we woke up and mom's not in the house. The babysitter's like, what? I'm on my way. When the babysitter gets there, she's not in the house for long before she immediately calls 911. When police officers get there, they notice that outside Sandra's car is in the driveway. Immediate red flag. They noticed that out front there was a flower bed, like a little miniature flower garden. It is completely trampled. The flowers are torn out the ground. It looked like there might have been a scuffle in the front yard. Police officers obviously talk to the daughters, like, when's the last time you seen your mother? They're like, last night when she put us to bed. And the oldest one, Robin, is like, yeah, I usually sleep with my mommy, but she would not let me sleep with her last night. They call the little girl's father, which is Sandra's ex-husband, to come get his daughters, and he does. Sandra's purse and keys were in the house. Her car was there. All of her belongings were there, but she was not. The little girls told police that they did not hear any commotion the night before. Like, they didn't hear a scuffle. They didn't hear any arguing. They heard nothing. It was like silence throughout the house. And then there is a huge break in the case. They find out that Sandra was friends with a psychopath. His name is Gary Addison Taylor. He had been in and out of psychiatric hospitals for pretty much just being insane. Countless crimes and violence against women. The boy was a nutball. Then they also find out, they end up searching the backyard of Gary Addison Taylor and they find human remains. 2 women are in his backyard buried, and he was charged with the murders of these 2 women, but they also found other remains as well. They weren't the only ones. But none of these remains came back to being Sandra Horwath. Sandra's oldest daughter, Robin, till this day is still trying to figure out what happened to her mother because she does not think that her mother just left on her own accord. Do you think she left on her own accord, or do you think that she was abducted? Do you think that Gary Addison Taylor had anything to do with her disappearance? Leave your thoughts down below.
Dang, that's crazy, bro.
This man has just been sentenced to life in prison for accidentally murdering his teenage daughter. Simon Vickers is 50 years old. He was from Darlington in the UK, and he was play fighting in the kitchen with his 14-year-old daughter Scarlett, and things quickly took a turn. He claims that they were just messing about in the kitchen. It started off with just throwing a couple of things at each other, like throwing grapes, getting the kitchen tongs and just messing about, grabbing at each other, and then for some reason Simon picked up a knife. He categorically denied knowingly or intentionally inflicting the wound that killed Scarlett. Simon claims that he didn't actually realise he was picking up a knife. He just picked something up because obviously they were kind of taking it in turns, throwing things and messing about, and he didn't realise that it was a knife that he'd picked up and thrown at Scarlett. He said it was a complete freak accident, and he told the police that he must be the unluckiest man alive. Scarlett's mother and Simon's partner of 27 years is actually standing by him, and she stood at his trial and said that he never ever would have knowingly harmed their only child. However, Scarlett's wound wasn't just a graze from someone throwing a knife from a distance, a forensic pathologist actually explained that Scarlett had an 11 centimetre deep wound to her heart.
Whoa.
And that kind of injury could have only been caused by a knife that was being held and used with force rather than a throw. The judge said that he thought maybe Simon had had a flash of anger, maybe because of the alcohol he'd been drinking and possibly because of Scarlett's attitude throughout the night. He also said that he accepts that Simon is completely heartbroken by what happened, but deep down only Simon knows the truth of what happened that night. He was sentenced to life with a minimum term of 51 years. Interestingly as well, Simon also had a previous conviction from 30 years before for wounding with intent using a Stanley knife. So using a knife is not too uncommon for Simon. What do you think? What are your opinions? Because I definitely don't think that this was just a play fight gone wrong.
He stabbed his daughter in the heart?
So this journalist was kaboom, unalived with a car bomb because she exposed some government corruption. The story is wild. And crazy enough, it starts in 1903 with this guy, Teddy. And Teddy is president of the United States, and he really wants to unite the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans by building a canal. And so he bullies the country of Colombia into handing over some of their territory, and he has a canal built. Now this territory eventually becomes the country we now know as Panama. And that's great and all, but now Panama has a problem. It needs revenue, and in order to generate revenue, it creates tax laws that help foreign businesses dodge taxes in their home countries. Now, what does all of this have to do with a car bomb? We'll get there. But first, we gotta fast forward several decades to 1977, where this German lawyer creates this law firm there in Panama. And because of the tax laws there that I just explained, this law firm actually operates legally, but they're still kind of shady. Because their main thing is they basically help rich people hide their money. Now let's fast forward again to 2016, where something crazy happens. An anonymous whistleblower gets a hold of this shady-ass law firm's internal documents, and they leak them to the public. These documents are known as the Panama Papers. And these Panama Papers expose all kinds of shady shit this law firm's clients are doing. And these clients are very well-connected people, like businessmen and politicians, world leaders, all kinds of powerful people. In fact, there's a whole Wikipedia page dedicated to just the people exposed by these documents.
Wow.
And of course, these powerful people are now really pissed off. In fact, they're so pissed off that they're allegedly willing to murder people over this. But we'll get back to that. First, we gotta talk about this woman. Her name's Daphne. And Daphne, she's a journalist at a local newspaper living on the small island of Malta. And as a journalist, Daphne is actually pretty gangster as fuck. She's exposing all kinds of corruption in Malta. She's writing about criminals and drug traffickers, any kind of corruption in politics. Daphne is there covering it in her column.
Wow.
Here's the problem with that though. Malta is a pretty small country, about 500,000 people. So it doesn't take long for her articles to start attracting the wrong kind of attention. And the people she's exposing and their affiliates, they start confronting her in the street. And they're sending her threatening letters. Sometimes they even show up to her house. And they also go after her legally, suing her for libel, essentially trying to bury her in lawsuits. One time, when she's not home, I guess some of them capture her dog and unalive it. And multiple times people try and set her house on fire. But despite all this, Daphne doesn't quit. Even though she knows she has a target on her back, she is determined to keep telling the truth. In fact, over time, she seems to get even more bold. Because in 2008, she decides to start her own blog. And unlike working at the newspaper, this blog will give her editorial control and all kinds of freedom to write whatever she wants. And here is where everything changes, because she starts going after really powerful people in Malta. And like, she starts writing about all the dirty money coming into the country and about all the politicians who let all this shady stuff happen. And of course, her blog blows the f up. Like, everyone's reading it. And I mean like everyone in Malta. I mean, she's averaging 500,000 hits a day in a country with a population of 500,000 people.
Wow.
But then things get even crazier. Because it's 2016, and an anonymous whistleblower gets a hold of a bunch of documents affiliated with a shady law firm in Panama, aka the Panama Papers. And as I said, these documents expose the shady business dealings of a bunch of very well-connected businessmen and politicians, and some of these powerful people exposed just happen to work in the Maltese government. And since Daphne is known for calling these turds out on their corruption, it is assumed that the anonymous whistleblower sends her the Panama Papers because now she has them. And using the information she gets from them, she exposes a huge scandal in Malta, that a member of parliament had been doing some shady business shit in offshore companies. Then she exposes that Malta's own prime minister, the guy at the very top of the government, that he and his wife were also doing some shady business shit out of an offshore company. She also exposes another huge scandal where the government had been selling Maltese passports in exchange for $1 million. Like, shit is out of control. But of course, now that she's blogging about all this, the backlash against her gets a whole lot worse. Suddenly her friends stop inviting her to places because they're afraid they'll get caught up in the consequences. A cafe she visits a lot suddenly gets raided by the police. And Daphne, she's always been totally brave about all this, but now she feels different. Now she's starting to get scared because she's starting to get full-on death threats. Not only that, the lawsuits against her are at an all-time high. Now she has 47 different libel cases pending against her. 47. But even so, nothing is more important to her than exposing the truth. So she just keeps on blogging. Until one day in 2017, Daphne's at home writing her blog. Then she finishes her post and she leaves the house and she gets in her car because she's got an appointment to go to. But she doesn't drive very far when suddenly, kaboom, there's a huge explosion. Her car goes up in flames. And then, boom, there's a second explosion. And of course, all of this unalives Daphne because someone had placed a bomb under her seat. And here is actually an image of her car afterwards. And I mean, as you can see, it's really messed up. There's like nothing left of it. Now, if you're thinking about how blatantly corrupt this all looks, I agree with you. But you know who else agrees with you? The people of Malta. Because everyone is shocked. And pretty quickly, there are huge protests in the streets, and people are pissed off, and they're holding up signs with Daphne's face on them. They want to know who ordered her assassination. In fact, it's such a big deal that they start calling on the prime minister to resign because of how he's handling this whole thing and what they see as his possible involvement. And in 2020, the prime minister of Malta, the leader of the country, actually resigns over this. That's how crazy it's gotten. Also, after some investigating, bam, 3 goons are arrested for Daphne's murder. Here's one of the guy's mugshot, and here's another guy's mugshot. And I don't have a mugshot for the third guy, but here's a picture of him. Now, according to these goons, their beef with Daphne wasn't necessarily personal. They were actually paid 150,000 euros to plant this car bomb and carry out her assassination. So then you have to ask, so then who paid them? Who ordered Daphne's murder? Well, so far, all leads trace back to a wealthy Maltese businessman. A businessman who had once been exposed by Daphne in her blog when she got the Panama Papers. Allegedly, he ordered the hit. And then so police go to his yacht where he's chilling and bam, they arrest him. And I don't have his mugshot, but here's a picture of him where he totally looks like a Bond villain. In fact, he looks like a Bond villain in every picture I could find of him. Anyway, the 3 goons plead guilty, and one of them gets 40 years in prison, another gets 40 years in prison, and the third gets 15 years in prison. While the Bond villain-looking guy, he did go to jail for a while, but he's out now on bail, waiting for his trial. That is wild.
Dang. The prime minister resigned.
I mean, look, I've lost 6 people over the years, and 2 with the electric chair, 2 with the gas chamber, and 2 with a lethal injection. And, you know, if people say it doesn't make any difference, that's the electric chair, just disgusting that you put 2,400 volts of electricity through someone's head. And, you know, Nicky Ingram, he and I were born in the same hospital, Addenbrooke's in Cambridge. And I had to watch him die. And I liked Nicky. We'd been friends for 12 years when they killed him. And, oh God, they go through all that nonsense about last meals. And Nikki said, I don't want a last meal, but you're about to kill me. And he said, I want a last cigarette. So I ask if they'll give him a last cigarette, and they say no, because it's bad for his health. And I say, you've got to be kidding me. You're planning to kill this poor guy. So I went out and told the media, and that they were humiliated by that. So they gave him a last cigarette. But then they shave his head, shave his leg, and put, 2,400 volts through him. It's just disgusting. It's not easy. After Nikki's execution, I still have PTSD from that. If I close my eyes right now, I can see the black and white of him being electrocuted right in front of me. It's horrible.
Man, that's crazy.
This student was unalived, and her attacker wore a bodysuit made entirely out of her skin. Kasia Zawada was a student studying religious studies at the University of Poland. She was described by her friends as being very, very lovely, but a little bit sad and a little bit withdrawn. In November 1998, Kasia had an appointment booked in at a psychiatric clinic because she was really struggling since her father had passed away. So her mum was going to meet her at this appointment, but when Kasia didn't show up, her mum got worried immediately, rang the police to report her missing, but the police actually said that it was too soon, she couldn't report her missing just yet. Months pass, Kasia is missing, and a tugboat that is working on the local river gets into a little bit of trouble. So the crew pulls it over, they stop to try and figure out what is going on, what's stopping it from going, when they notice a weird rubber band-like consistency wrapped around the propeller. They had no idea what they were looking at. They tried to take it off as best as they could, but they actually noticed a human ear, and they realised quickly that this was human skin. The police were called immediately, and DNA tests were done on the skin, and it was identified to be that of Kasia. Initially, it was thought that she had fallen into the river and her body had got damaged by the propeller, and she'd ended up getting hurt that way, and that had caused her to be unalived. But then it was found that she was actually skinned alive. Her head and her limbs had carefully been removed, and the rest of her body had been turned into a bodysuit which had been worn by her attacker. In the weeks leading up to her death, she had been severely beaten, drugged, essayed, and stabbed multiple times. While the police were investigating Kasia's case, a local man named Vladimir unalived his own dad, removed his face, and started wearing his dad's face as a mask. And the police thought, this is way too much of a coincidence. How on earth has a man literally done this when we are dealing with a woman who had had something very similar happen? They thought this is far too wild for it to be two separate people. But after a thorough investigation, it was found that Vladimir was actually nothing to do with Kasia's murder. 19 years later, in 2017, the police arrest a man named Robert Yenvichki, who is 52 years old. He is arrested because a friend of his anonymously wrote a letter to the police saying, I think you need to investigate my friend, because they basically accused him of doing this crime. Yenvichki had actually been a person of interest at the time, but there was no evidence to link it. So since the police got this mystery letter from this person, they decided to go in and actually do a search of his apartment, and they did find traces of blood in his bathtub and on his bed frame. He also had a history of harassing women. He was known to have visited Kasia's gravesite multiple times. He sometimes worked in a lab where he had to dissect human corpses. Yenvichki claims that he has nothing to do with Kasia's unaliving. He has no idea about it, but everything has been kept really, really under wraps. So I actually do not know whether or not he's going to get found guilty of this.
Come on, man. People crazy, man.
If there's ever a case that needs to be reopened, it's this one. Because she was found hanging from a balcony in her boyfriend's summer mansion, completely nude, gagged, and her hands and feet were bound behind her back. Oh, and there was a really ominous message painted on the door leading into the room where she was found, not in her handwriting. The police are saying she did this to herself, but I am not buying it. So let's talk about it. This is the mysterious death of Rebecca Zahau, and I promise you this is simultaneously going to piss you off and make you lose a little bit of faith in the justice system. So Rebecca Zahau was only 32 years old when she unexpectedly died in 2011. She grew up in Nepal and Germany and had only lived in the US for about 10 years before tragedy struck. Rebecca was extremely smart and worked as an eye care professional, and in 2008 she started dating Jonah Shacknai. Jonah was the CEO of a really top-notch pharmaceutical company, and this man was wealthy. He was the 9th highest paid CEO in Arizona in 2018. And to kind of paint a picture of just how wealthy he was, he owned this house. This house is known as the Spreckles Mansion, and it's located in Coronado, California. It was actually just his summer beach house, but It's huge. It's over 10,000 square feet and has 10 bedrooms and 11
Damn.
bathrooms. Jonah had previously been married twice, and from those marriages, he had 3 children, one of which was this cute little boy named Max. So the story really begins on July 11th, 2011. That night, Rebecca, her sister, and 6-year-old Max were all at home at the Spreckles mansion. At this point in time, Rebecca had quit her job to be closer with Jonah and his kids, so it wasn't unusual for her to be left alone with Max. The night was going well when, out of nowhere, Max somehow fell face first over the second floor stair banister. As a result, he suffered severe injuries to his spinal cord and facial bones, and the injury to his spinal cord was so bad that it affected his heart rate and his ability to breathe. Rebecca said that she was in the bathroom at the time of his fall, but found him just moments later, and it was at this point that her sister called 911. When authorities arrived, they found Max not breathing and unresponsive, and he was taken to a nearby children's hospital. Doctors informed Jonah and Rebecca that with his injuries, things really didn't look good and to prepare for the worst. The next day, Rebecca dropped her sister off at the airport to go back home to Missouri where the rest of her family lived. And she also picked up Jonah's brother Adam, who flew in after hearing the news about Max. All 3 of them ate dinner that night with a friend, and after, Jonah returned to the hospital to be with Max. Since the mansion was so big, Jonah let Adam stay in the guest house, so after dinner, Rebecca and Adam went back to Spreckles mansion. But what happened after this has never been explained. That night, neighbors reported hearing really loud music coming from the mansion, which was unusual. And by 6:45 the next morning, Rebecca was dead. Adam reportedly found her hanging from a balcony outside of the house. According to him, she was nude, her hands, wrists, and ankles had been bound behind her back, and she was gagged. He called 911 at 6:48 that morning, just 3 minutes after finding her. But before police could get there, and for reasons unknown, he cut down her body and untied her hands. He then texted Jonah that Rebecca was dead and to get home right away. When police arrived, they pronounced Rebecca dead at the scene, and initially investigators thought that this was a clear case of homicide. I mean, with the way she was tied up and the fact that she was nude, it screamed foul play. And adding to this is the fact that an ominous message had been painted on the door leading to the balcony where she was found. It was in black paint, and it said, quote, "She saved him. Can he save her?" End quote. So again, this seems like foul play, right? But after investigating, authorities couldn't find any other DNA at the crime scene besides Rebecca's. They found her fingerprints on a knife that was reportedly used to cut the rope that she was found hanging from. And they only found her toe prints on the balcony. Then the autopsy was done, and it really only raises more questions. The autopsy found that Rebecca experienced 4 separate instances of head trauma, and how it got there has gone under much debate. The initial medical examiner said that she may have struck her head on the way down after falling off the balcony, thus resulting in the head trauma. They believe that she didn't immediately die after falling, and so she could have hit her head on the side of the balcony. But since her body was cut down before police could arrive, as well as her hands and feet, there's no way to tell for sure exactly what position her body was in, and that made things difficult for the medical examiner. Other forensic experts disagree with this, and they say that in this specific scenario, it's extremely unlikely that she would have gone over the balcony and hit her head 4 separate times. So while this shocking news of Rebecca's sudden passing resonated with Jonah, he was then hit with a second devastating blow. Just 3 days after Rebecca was found dead, his 6-year-old son Max succumbed to his injuries from the fall. Max's official cause of death was due to brain damage caused by oxygen deprivation, and this all stemmed from the injuries that he got during the fall. It took authorities 10 days of investigating Max's death, but they ultimately concluded that it was just a tragic accident, and he must have just somehow tripped and fell over the banister on his own. And this is where things start to get twisted. Not everyone agrees that Max's death was accidental, and one of those people was the trauma doctor who examined Max prior to his death. After examining him and reviewing his autopsy, this doctor didn't believe that Max's injuries were consistent with his cause of death. This doctor found evidence that he may have actually suffocated prior to his fall, but nonetheless, Max's death was still ruled accidental. These 2 sudden yet very similar deaths in the same popular mansion gained national coverage because it's honestly just a crazy story. Everyone thought for sure Rebecca's death would be labeled a murder, but that was not the case. After 2 months of investigating, the San Diego County Sheriff's Office ruled that Rebecca died by suicide. They cited that this was because they found absolutely no evidence that another person was involved, and they found no signs of foul play. But Rebecca's family felt like this was just not the case. They don't believe that she would have ended her own life, especially like that. So they decided to have a second independent autopsy done, and the findings are horrific. The second autopsy found specific fractures in her throat that weren't previously noted, and these fractures seemed consistent with manual strangulation, not by suicidal hanging. The second medical examiner strongly believes that Rebecca was murdered, and that this was not by her own doing. This was only further validated when they found additional evidence that she had been sexually assaulted prior to her death. They noted so many inaccuracies in the initial investigation, and so many things were just not investigated properly. I think one of the main questions that her family and so many other people have is why her hands and feet were tied behind her back. It seems like an unusual way for someone to end their own life, especially naked like that. But police believe that she tied herself up that way to prevent herself from changing her mind. And another major question is the ominous message painted in black paint on the door to her room. Police say that it was a suicide note, but one thing that they failed to look at was the fact that Rebecca loved to paint, and she would often sign her paintings. This note that was painted on her door did not match her handwriting at all, and according to her family, it doesn't even sound like something she would say. So her family pushed investigators to dig deeper, and this is when they obtained Rebecca's cell phone records. On the night she died, Rebecca talked to her oldest sister until 10 p.m. About an hour later, she then gets a text from Jonah's ex-wife's sister. This was Max's aunt. She reportedly wanted to stop by the house to talk about Max's accident, but Rebecca never responded to this text. And then the last time Rebecca was ever active on her phone was at 12:50 a.m. This is when she checked a voicemail that was left by Jonah. This message was deleted, so no one has ever actually heard what was said, but it was reportedly about Max's worsening condition, since at this point in time he was still in critical condition at the hospital. To police, this was evidence that Rebecca felt remorse over Max being gravely injured, and in their minds, this was cause for her to end her own life. They even reenacted her death to see if it would have been possible for her to have bound herself like that, and they provided a video of a woman doing it. So again, Rebecca's death was labeled a suicide.
Wow.
But her family still doesn't believe this. They believe that she was met with foul play, so they filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Adam, the only other person that was in the house when she died. And during that civil trial, enough evidence was presented that a jury found him responsible for Rebecca's death. Because of this, her family was awarded $5 million. But eventually this was reduced to $600K as the case was dismissed down the road after Adam appealed. A lot of people question what really happened to Rebecca. It's odd that she died just 2 days after Max was mortally injured in the very same house. And it's also odd that absolutely no other evidence or DNA was found at the scene, which kind of leads me to another point. Many people suspect the Shacknai's involvement, or maybe even covering up or influencing the suicide ruling strictly due to the fact that they are extremely wealthy men. Some think that she really may have just felt responsible for Max's injuries and chose to end her own life. Others believe that a random intruder could have done this. And of course, some believe that Adam and possibly Max's aunt could have been responsible. His aunt did text Rebecca that night, and Adam was literally staying in the guest house. And this theory was only pushed more when in 2023, a new witness came forward, and they said that on the night Rebecca died, they heard a man and a woman yell, quote, "Hold her still, hold her still."
Whoa.
End quote. These are only theories though, because as of today, Rebecca's death is still labeled a suicide, and authorities have stated that they have no plans to reopen the case. Her sister is actually releasing a book next week about Rebecca's death, and in it sheds light on some new evidence that was never tested back in 2011. What's incredibly sad is that her sister has just been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and so she's literally doing everything she can to make sure that Rebecca gets justice while she's still here. But it's now been 14 years, and whatever happened to Rebecca that summer night remains a mystery.
Wow, that is crazy.
In 1979, a teenage girl accepts a babysitting job at an isolated home in the Minnesota woods. After putting the children to bed, she settles on the couch to watch TV, only to be startled by a phone call. She picks it up and hears heavy breathing, when suddenly a man's unsettling voice asks, "Have you checked on the children?" Nervous, she dismisses it as a prank and hangs up. 15 minutes later, the phone rings again. This time the voice asks, "Why haven't you checked on the children?"
Whoa.
Panic sets in and she calls 911. The operator advises her to keep the caller on the line if they call back, allowing the call to be traced. Moments later, the phone rings again, and the voice snarls, "Check on the children now." Trembling, she keeps the call connected as instructed. Once more the phone rings. The operator's voice crackles through, urgent and frantic. "Get out of the house. The calls are coming from upstairs." Terrified but worried about the children, she hesitates before fleeing outside. She bolted out of the house, her heart pounding in her chest. There, a tall man stepped out of the shadows, his presence looming as he stared her down with a chilling intensity, and he asked in a cold, menacing voice, "Why didn't you check on the children?"
I don't know if that's some bullshit or not, but
They called this man the toy box killer, and he might be one of the most terrifying men I ever had the misfortune of reading about. And now you're gonna know all about him too. David Parker Ray had been having dark fantasies of hurting women and just doing the most terrible things to them as young as when he was only 9 years old. He is a textbook sadist, which makes him one of the most terrifying people out there, because when he hurt women, he did it because he enjoyed it. Like, deeply enjoyed it. David Parker Ray is known as the toy box killer because he had this trailer in his backyard that he called the toy box, that he filled with everything and anything that could cause the most unspeakable pain to his victims.
What?
And he spent like over $100,000 on the items inside of his toy box, so
What?
there were a lot of things in there. He would kidnap young women to keep in his toy box, and then once they were in his toy box, he would play them a tape recording where he would explain in graphic detail everything that he planned to do to them. Is that not the most terrifying thing you've ever heard? And this tape recording is online if you want to go hear it, but do it at your own risk because it is deeply disturbing. In his toy box, he also had a chair, like a chair that you would find at the Lady Doctor. And then he would chain his victims to the chair.
Whoa.
He would essay them and then hurt them in the most unspeakable ways possible. David Parker Ray would also film everything he did to these women, and then he would sell the videos to I don't know who, but scary people, and he would sell them for a lot of money. David Parker Ray did not act alone. He actually had a lot of accomplices, including his own daughter. David's daughter, Jessie, was always very close to her father, almost too close. Like, a lot of people actually think that her father fathered her child, and Jessie was trained from a very young age to be like her father's assistant, and she would help lure women to be her father's victims, including her own friends. And once David decided that he was done with the women that he had in captivity, he would do one of three things to them. He would either kill them, or he would sell them across the Mexico border into human trafficking, or he would even let them go. He would let them go on a remote country back road, and they would never, come forward or turn him in the police because he kept them so heavily sedated on a bunch of substances that they would not even remember a single thing. Some of his victims that he did let go ended up coming forward years later after the memories came back years later. So chances are that there's probably a lot of women out there that don't even remember that they were victims of this guy.
Wow.
David Parker Ray was really living a double life. He lived in this really, really small town where everyone knew each other. Everyone thought that he was a normal, good guy, a good father, but they had no idea how evil their neighbor really was.
Crazy.
David has also been described as kind of a ladies' man, if you can even believe that, because he always had some pretty young girlfriend. He even had this girlfriend, Cindy, who was also helping him with his toy box. I'm not sure how this man was able to convince so many people to help him out, because even when his daughter Jessie got a boyfriend, he was able to convince the boyfriend to also help with the toy box and help kidnap and kill these victims. So it was just these four people committing the most evil crimes imaginable.
Right.
And all of this only ever came to light in March of 1999 when David and his girlfriend kidnapped a 22-year-old girl named Cynthia. They had her in captivity for 3 entire days, doing the worst things possible to her, when David's girlfriend accidentally left the keys to her restraints in her reach while David was at work. She grabbed the house phone and tried to call 911, but before she could say anything to the person on the other phone, David's girlfriend came back in, found her, caught her, and then the two started fighting. Luckily, she was able to escape, and she runs to the first house that she can find. She's banging on the door, she's screaming that she's been held captive, and Cynthia's not wearing anything. She's wearing nothing but a dog collar and a bunch of chains. The neighbor calls 911, but because Cynthia has been on all these substances, she can't really remember much. But luckily, she did make that 911 call when she first escaped. So they were able to track where that 911 call was made from and track it right back to David Parker Ray's house. These small town police officers had no idea what they were walking into when they stepped into David's toy box. They find hundreds of videos of what David did to his victims, because remember, he filmed it all, but David tried to say, hey, everything in the videos is consensual, it's just acting. But his 3 accomplices, his girlfriend, his daughter, and his daughter's boyfriend, they all turn on him and they confess everything. They tell the police everything in graphic detail. They told the police that David would kill at least one girl every single year for 40 years, you guys. What? And that David had this boat and he would take it to this nearby lake that had these ginormous catfish, you guys, and these catfish would eat anything. and that's how David would dispose of his victims. But unfortunately, because of this, they were not able to find a single one of David's victims' bodies.
Damn.
Even though it's believed that David killed at least 60 women, but probably more, and they had videotapes of him doing it, they were not able to charge him with a single one. For the crimes that they were able to find concrete evidence of, they were able to sentence David Parker Ray to 224 years in prison. But get this, after spending 1 day in prison, David Parker Ray had a heart attack and died. So he never even had to serve a prison sentence for all these terrible crimes that he committed. His 3 accomplices, his girlfriend Cindy, his daughter Jessie, and her boyfriend Roy, all spent only a couple years in prison before being released, so they're all out free somewhere in the world right now today. This is one of those terrible cases where you feel like there was no justice that was really gotten and there's no closure because of it, and it's just despicable. This man is so scary, and the fact that there's people like that out there gives me the chills. Please let me know all your guys' thoughts in the comments, and while you're there, please let me know what case you want to see me cover next. I love you guys so much, and I will see you guys tomorrow.
This stuff is too much.
This is without a doubt the creepiest mugshot I've ever seen. This is 33-year-old Solomon Galligan. He is an S offender that tried to kidnap a little boy from an elementary school in Colorado. This entire ordeal happened last Friday, and he went up to multiple children. Before police arrived, he tried to grab the young boy and flee, but that was unsuccessful, so he just fled to begin with. He was later caught by police and charged with 1 count of kidnapping. As a result, the elementary school and the surrounding areas are increasing security and police presence. But bro, this mugshot is definitely the creepiest shit I've ever seen. There's not a single feeling of remorse or regret in those eyes. He's now being held on a $25,000 bond. He had a similar incident in 2012 and he failed to register as an offender. Now, luckily, the little boy that he tried to kidnap was unharmed. And this also happened while the kids were at recess. I'm not sure how this happened. I feel like when I was growing up in recess, all of the teachers would be watching us.
Right.
But they definitely need to step up security. Let me know what you guys think about this case in the comment section below. And as always, these videos are for informational purposes only.
Crazy people, man.
What does it feel like to kill someone?
Didn't feel anything at all. Nothing. Nothing.
An adrenaline rush?
No, didn't feel a thing. No. I didn't get no adrenaline rush, nothing.
Fear?
No, nothing. No sense of fear. No sense of foreboding or anything like that, nothing.
Sense of power?
No sense of power, nothing like that at all. No.
So
Sense of looking over your shoulder, did anyone see it? That's about it. What do you expect me to say?
This is Jared Fogle, one of the worst pedophiles in American history. So if you don't know who Jared Fogle was, he was the spokesperson for Subway for a number of years. Jared initially became famous and then eventually became the spokesman of Subway because he dropped so much weight while eating a Subway diet. According to Jared, he lost almost 245 pounds while eating almost exclusively from Subway. Obviously, this was a huge story, and when Subway heard about this, they contacted Jared and eventually made him the spokesman for their entire company. I swear to God, I remember this. For years, you couldn't turn on the TV without seeing this guy's face. So in 2004, when Jared was at the height of his popularity, he launched the Jared Foundation, a foundation determined to fight childhood obesity. This foundation saw Jared touring schools across the nation, talking to kids about losing weight, and yeah, just being heavily involved with children, which people at the time thought was a great thing. But it was when he was away from the cameras, behind the scenes, when Jared was engaging in some of the most deplorable behavior I've ever read about. So in 2007, a radio host and journalist from Florida came forward to the FBI and reported that Jared was saying and doing some concerning things. Apparently, while at a middle school event, Jared had been talking to her about performing lewd acts on a minor. He had texted her about all of these things, and she even recorded him saying all of this stuff. At one point, apparently, Jared even asked this journalist if she could install webcams in her children's bedrooms so he could watch them. What? Obviously, this was concerning. This journalist recorded all of this, turned it into the FBI, but they told her that they couldn't do anything because they didn't have enough evidence. And now we got to talk about Russell Taylor, a guy who was heavily involved in Jared's foundation. So when he wasn't working on the Children's Foundation, this guy, Russell Taylor, was producing CP in his home. Apparently, between the years 2011 and 2015, Russell Taylor had videotaped minors in his own home and traded photographs of them with none other than, you guessed it, Jared Fogle, king of the footlong. According to court documents, Jared actually asked Russell if he could move some of the nanny cams in his home so he could watch children in varying states of undress or while they were naked taking a bath. Russell also claimed that Jared made him set up accounts on porn sites in his name, and he wanted to basically run his whole CP operation for him. Well, shortly after Russell Taylor was arrested, Jared Fogle's home was raided, and guess what they found? A ton of CP. On the same day that his home was raided, Subway severed all ties with Jared, and some new disturbing facts came to light during the trial. Apparently, years prior, Jared had been texting a Subway franchisee named Cindy, and over these texts, he talked about wanting to abuse kids aged 9 to 16. He told Cindy she should sell herself for on Craigslist, and even asked her to arrange a meetup between him and her 16-year-old cousin. Eventually, Jared pled guilty to possession of CP and traveling to conduct an illicit behavior with a minor. Apparently, while in New York City, he paid to have with a 17-year-old girl. But this story isn't over yet. I'm going to post part 2, and it definitely...
Bruh. What in the... What? I didn't know all that stuff. I heard he went to trial and all this stuff, but I didn't... This is... very disturbing.
It gets more interesting from here on out.
I don't even want to see part 2, bro.
On August 14, 1997, 37-year-old Patty McConnell stopped for a day of fun with her 2 children at the beautiful Laird Hot Springs in British Columbia. Now, at these hot springs, connecting the different areas are these long boardwalks. And as Patty and her son, 13-year-old Kelly, walked along one of these, Patty heard some rustling in the brush. And when she looked over, she was staring into the eyes of a 220-pound male black bear. And she kind of whispers back at her son. She goes, "Kelly, bear." And her son thinks that she's joking. So he goes, "Oh, come on, Mom." And she goes, "No, Kelly." And finally, he sees the bear, and he thinks, okay, if we just stand still, it'll leave us alone. So he tells his mom, "Mom, don't move." And she freezes. But the bear has no intention of leaving them alone. It comes charging at Patty, and it starts to make its way up over this wood hand railing when finally Kelly yells at his mom, and he says, "Mom, run!" And she goes sprinting down the boardwalk away from this bear, but she doesn't have far to go. She runs up onto this viewing platform, and it's a dead end. There's this wooden railing all the way around it, and she doesn't have any time to get over or through that before the bear is on top of her. And it pins her to the ground, and it begins to bite at her face, her shoulders, her neck, and it's clawing at her chest. And meanwhile, her son Kelly is watching all this, and he doesn't think about his own safety whatsoever. He just wants to save his mama. So he goes running down the boardwalk after this bear and his mom, and he jumps on the bear, and he starts beating the bear. But this is not deterring the bear whatsoever. So he gets off the bear, and he runs around in front of it, and he kicks it as hard as he can in the face, all while screaming, "Get off my mom!" But this also doesn't work. So finally, he finds the biggest stick that he can, and he hits the bear as hard as he can right in the nose. And finally, this works. The bear gets off of his mom and then tackles Kelly. And it's straddling Kelly, and it's taking big bites out of his arms and his shoulders, and literally consuming those right in front of this boy while it claws him up. Meanwhile, down at the hot springs, there's a 57-year-old guy named Ray Kitchen who's there with his daughter. And he is hearing all these screaming, and he knows that somebody is in a fight for their life. He might not know exactly what's going on, but again, without regard for his own safety, he goes running up the boardwalk to go help however he can. And when he shows up, the boy, Kelly, is pinned to the ground by this bear, being eaten alive. So Ray, he's pounding on the boardwalk, trying to distract the bear. He starts throwing things at it. This isn't working. So he grabs a big stick and he starts hitting the boardwalk. This isn't working. And finally, he takes that big stick and uses it like a lance and goes running at the bear. And he drives the stick as hard as he can into the bear's stomach or ribs. And this does get the bear off Kelly. It turns on Ray, it charges him, and it tackles him with such force that both Ray and the bear go flying through this thick wooden handrail along the boardwalk, and they go tumbling down into the woods. And now Ray is screaming because now the bear has Ray pinned up against a tree, and it's eating him alive. Well, at this time, there are 3 other people down at the hot springs, a 71-year-old man named Frank, and 2 people in their 30s, a man and a woman named Ingrid and Brad. Now, those 3, they hear the screaming and they go running to help. And when they show up, you've got these 2 bloody people, a woman and a child, laying on the boardwalk, motionless, and you've got Ray being eaten down in the woods. And so the 3 of them pick up the biggest log that they can all 3 of them carry at once, and they use it like a battering ram. And they're ramming this log into the bear to try and get it off of Ray, but it's not working. And Brad recognizes that it's not working, and he yells at the other 2 and he says, "You guys, I've got to go find a park ranger. We need a gun." So he goes sprinting back down the boardwalk to go and find a gun. Well, as soon as he leaves, the bear grabs Ray by the throat. It lifts him up in the air, shakes him, and throws him. And when it throws him, it ripped out his windpipe, and it almost completely decapitated him. So it killed him almost instantly at that point. So now the other 2 people, Frank and Ingrid, they know that they can no longer help Ray. So even though the bear is still right there, they go and they help Kelly and Patty, and they're trying to get them medical aid. They're using their clothes to try and stop the bleeding and save their lives and do CPR. Well, the bear is distracted by Ray's body for a little bit, but eventually it turns back on the group of people that are trying to help Kelly and Patty. And it reaches its arms through the boardwalk trying to get to Patty, the mom, while they're trying to give her CPR. And Ingrid, the woman who's trying to give her CPR, starts kicking at the bear's paw, screaming at it, and somehow she makes the bear go away. The bear goes running down the boardwalk, but the bear isn't done yet. Yet another person, a 20-year-old college student named Ari, he was coming to try and help as well, and he ends up running face to face with this bear on the boardwalk. And the bear just tackles him, it forces him up against a tree, and again, it starts literally eating him alive, pinned up against this tree. Well, meanwhile, Brad, the guy who went to go find a ranger, doesn't find a ranger, but in the parking lot of the hot springs, he finds a guy from Alaska that's got 2 rifles in his truck. So they get those rifles along with another Canadian guy named Dwayne, and they go running down the boardwalk to find this bear eating Ari. And when they do, they fire 3 shots into the bear, killing it. Luckily, because of Ray Kitchen's selflessness, Kelly, he was saved. Kelly almost saved his mom. He wasn't successful. Patty did pass away. But Patty and Ray were the only 2 that passed away. Kelly and Ari, the other 2 people who were attacked, they survived. Although Kelly did sustain massive injuries, punctured lungs, broken vertebrae, broken ribs, obviously big chunks of flesh torn away, and having to live with watching his mother get mauled to death in front of him by a bear while he tried everything he could to save her. His mom's last words to him were to tell him that she loved him very much and to take care of his sisters and find his little sister a good place to live.
That sounds crazy.
This is 100% true story that happened to a woman in Madison, Wisconsin. Now, there was this woman named Sherry who moved into this house with her 2 children in Madison, Wisconsin. Now, she said, at the time, she didn't believe in anything supernatural. She really thought that was a bunch of nonsense. But she said, right away when they moved in, she would notice, out of the corner of her eye, sometimes shadows moving across the walls. She would hear strange noises that she couldn't explain. But she said for the most part, it was just a normal house. One night, she's upstairs in her bedroom and she's folding laundry. She hears talking coming from her son's room. So she makes her way over to his room. The door's closed and she hears her son having a full-on conversation with someone.
Whoa.
And she's like, who is he talking to, at 12:30 at night? So she opens the door, and when she looks in his room, he is not in his bed. So she starts yelling for him. She looks down and sees him next to the side of his bed, on his knees, crouched down, with his head under the bed, talking to someone.
Oh, shit.
And she's like, hey, who are you talking to? Like, who's under there? And her son's like, I can't tell you. And she said, what do you mean you can't tell me? Like, who's under the bed? And he's like, I can't say. He'll get mad. And she's like, what? Who's under there? So she runs over to the bed and she looks underneath there. It's empty. There's nothing under there. So she's like, you know what? Just get back in bed. Like, just stop, doing whatever you're doing. Several weeks pass, and like on a regular basis, she keeps finding her son talking to someone under the bed, except there's no one there. So after a few weeks of this happening, she thinks maybe something is wrong with her son. So she takes him to this child therapist. The therapist assesses him and says, he seems completely fine. It's probably just his imagination. So several months pass and he keeps on doing this. Well, one day she's sitting down in the living room with him and they're talking when she notices he has some scratches and bruises all over his body.
Shit.
And she's like, where did you get those scratches and bruises from? Like, what's going on? And he's like, I can't say, I can't tell you. And she's like, yes, you have to tell me, what is going on with you? And finally he breaks down and he starts crying and stuff. And he just starts freaking out. And then he runs up to his room. So the mom, at this time is like, I don't know what to do. Like, what is going on with my son? Like, she's just panicking. Later that night, she's awoken to her son screaming in his bedroom. She runs as fast as she can. She goes in his room. She finds him halfway underneath the bed. He's grabbing onto the bed frame, and it looks like something is pulling him under the bed. So she immediately grabs him, pulls him out from under the bed. She looks under there. There's no one there. So she's like, you know what? This is weird. Like, you're sleeping with me tonight. You're going to be in bed with me tonight. So they go back to her bedroom. He lays down. He falls asleep. She's sitting in bed. She can't sleep. She's freaked out about this whole situation. When all of a sudden she hears, shh, hey, come under the bed.
What?
She's like, what? She looks over. Her son is sleeping. But then once again, she hears, hey, come here under the bed. I need to talk to you. And it's like a man's voice. And she's like, no, who are you? Like, go away. And the man's like, come on, get under the bed. I need to tell you something. And she's like, no, I'm not going under the bed. And she said this man, whoever he was, just started yelling obscenities and getting really angry. So she grabs her son. They get out of the house. And she said she left that night and never went back. And still to this day, that house sits there. And she said she's talked to the neighbors. And they said since she's moved, several families have lived there and they move out immediately.
All right, guys, that was another TikTok compilation, true crime. That was very disturbing, man. Some of the stuff that these people are doing, it's too much, man. It's crazy. It is crazy. You made it this far. Drop real one for real in the comments. Like I said, I'm gonna heart every comment on this video. We're gonna take it back to the old school way, man, where I used to heart everything. But crazy. This stuff right here is crazy, man. But till next time, self-love and positivity. Fire Squad, I got you and you know it.